And it is so wonderful to be back also. So, Asha, that was, I mean, was it not breathtaking?
Yes.
And it's so true. Each one of us is born to be who we are, who we were born to be. And yet at the same time, we all have to evolve more and more and more in order to be that which we were born to be. You understand what I'm saying? We were born, but who we were is just the kernel of who we are right now, right? It was a seed, and we're looking at a seed this morning. And who is Benedict going to be? His parents are going to be part of it. You know, the community is going to be part of it. His experiences in life are going to be part of it. But he's going to evolve, isn't he? He's not going to be the same today, you know, in 20 years. At least we hope not. We don't want that, do we? We want him to evolve. And each one of us has evolved today. I had a revelation this morning. And you know, it's wonderful when you get to come and speak to people and you have a revelation yourself. And because so many times people expect them, you know, the audience to have a revelation, and I'm coming here to speak to you, to impart my intelligence and my wisdom. And so when I get that revelation, it's like, oh, this is so great, because something's new for me, and consequently it's something that's new for you. Now, I don't want anybody turning around, looking around today to see who is here and who's not here, and wishing somebody was here to hear what's being said. Because my prayer this morning was for those who have ears to hear, for them to be here. You got it? So if you're here, this is your message for today. Okay? Got it? All right. So I've been reading this summer. I have a ton of books, and I decided, you know, when I've been a minister for almost 30 years. And you don't have time, a lot of times when you're a minister, to spend a lot of time reading books. And so I found a book in my library that I had not fully read. And it just, you know how books just call to you sometimes? So this one called to me. It's called Sacred Quest by L. Robert Keck, K-E-C-K. And he is talking about our evolution, our spiritual evolution, or the evolution of the human soul. And he says there are 3 epochs. The first one was 35,000 years ago. And it was, you know, humanity starting to become aware of itself. It was a time of peace and nonviolence because there was a unity with nature, and because women brought forth life, then the goddess was paramount. It was a time of nonviolence, and they found, you know, we've all heard of the cave dwellings and the pictures on the caves and whatever. Those are all spiritual pictures, and they found that the people would go to various places deep into mountains, and they would have spiritual rituals, and they would come together in unity. About 10,000 years ago, things started to change, and that became Epoch 2. And in Epoch 2, we have the rise of a sense of separation, or what he calls reduction. And from the unity came separation. Those of you who've been around New Thought a while, you've heard separation, right? So there was unity, and then this 10,000 years of separation. And this reduction needed to happen in order for the human ego and mentality and mental facilities to develop, okay? But in the process of that, guess what happened? We had patriarchy and hierarchy. And then from patriarchy and hierarchy, you get violence, because now you have this who's low and who's high, and in order to keep the high high and the low low, what do you have to do? You have to engage in some kind of violence, okay? So you have the patriarchy, you have the hierarchy, and along with that, you have this whole sense of separation, of individualism, and I'm better than you are, and that group over there and us over here are different, they're bad and we're good. All of that comes as a part of this second epoch. And also along with that is the sense of power and control. Do you recognize this? Because we're at the tail end of that, because we're on the way to Epoch 3. And those of us who are involved in unity and science of mind and other new thought religions are really on the cutting edge of all of that. We're moving forward in a way that everybody isn't moving yet. So we can still see those strands of patriarchy, can't we? We see women, because women are subjugated during patriarchal times. And so we see women struggling to have a voice and to be heard and to have some sense of power and semblance. We see in our United Church of Religious Science, which I was ordained in and spent many years as a minister, we had around 1999, 1998, somewhere around in there, we started a new organization. We wanted to change our organizational model because we had a hierarchical model and it wasn't working for us. And we looked at it and saw that, we were in those stages of death, that we would be dying as an organization if we didn't do something. And so we got together and we created a new organization, and guess what? That organization is flat. And so consequently, nobody's head was higher than the other. Now, you did have to have someone who was, a spiritual leader, but they were a spiritual leader, which meant that they got to speak because of what the rest of us told them to say. You know what I'm saying? So part of the new epic is what? Democracy. And in the late 1700s, the U.S. and France were the only two democracies in the world. Did you know that? And now there are over 100. And most of them have come about, after World War I. So there's this massive change that has come about, and those of us who pay attention and study history have seen waves of this going on, haven't we? We've seen it on a physical level. But what we forget is that the physical is a manifestation of what? The spiritual, right? So really all of this turmoil is going on from within, from that soul level, from a spiritual level, and it's showing up in an outer level. And those of us who are participating in these newer religions, and we're opening ourselves and we're singing songs that say God is who we are, we're on the cutting edge of something new, of that new epoch. And so right now, we're living in a time with great change, and some of us are having a really hard time with it. And I know a lot of us in New Thought are having a hard time with it too. And the reason is because on the one hand, we want peace and love and joy, and we do our meditations and our prayers, and we do all of this stuff trying to be as spiritually enlightened and awakened as we possibly can. And on the other hand, what do we have over here? We have stuff pulling us back to say there's violence in the world, there's evil in the world, there's fear in the world, and we've got to be aware of that. We've got to be participating with that, and we've got to somehow be a part of that. Last night, I had a talk with a friend of mine who's a minister in Colorado. And one of the things she was telling me is about an older man in her congregation who has been around for a long time, is a real integral part of the congregation. He was 90 this last year, and his wife is around the same age. But in the last few months, she's been deteriorating. And he has been having problems with his eyes and can't see. So she told him, look, when you guys need to go somewhere, to the doctor or something, let me know, I will drive you, or I'll find somebody else who will. Well, his wife and him decided that she could drive him to the doctor. She was so upset that she called his son and said, look, this is what's going on. The son said, yeah, I understand. I've noticed my mom is not doing as well. And so we were talking about the possibility that she could hurt somebody while she was driving. And what do we have today? I'm sitting there and I was like, I just do not believe this. Because the possibility that we were talking about yesterday happened yesterday to the young man that you were talking about. And notice when we prayed for the young man, but we did not pray for the elderly person. That elderly person is going to need what? Forgiveness. And see, we have to learn how to expand our idea. We have to evolve our idea of love to be inclusive of the young man and his family, as well as the elderly person and his family. Because that is what spiritual love is. Spiritual love is inclusive of all. Spiritual love, when we evolve to that place where we are truly loving, we are what? Forgiving. We are compassionate. We're understanding. We're accepting. This is what is. So we have to deal with what is. And part of what is one person is hurt and the other person is responsible for that hurt. And all of it has to be included in our love. Think about it. Science has managed to do something and understand something that religion has not, except for those of us in New Thought. I'm going to tell you that because here's what science understands. Science understands there's a wholeness, WHOLENESS. There is a wholeness to everything. Every cell in your body has the exact same identical DNA, but it uses different things in different places. It's sort of like when you show up as a student in a classroom, you are acting differently than if you were the teacher in that classroom. Do you understand? If you are the cashier at a grocery store, your behavior is different than the person who is buying something, right? The consumer, right? So the cells in your body are the same. Your eye cells the cells arrange themselves so that you can see. Your heart cells, arrange themselves so that they can be a muscle and beat and take care of you that way. Your lung cells, same thing. Okay? So the cells in your body have the same identical DNA. So in the 70s, a guy named Carl Pregram got a Nobel Prize for discovering this whole idea of the hologram. You know what a hologram is? A hologram is when you have a whole and then you break it into pieces, and each piece has the same identical whatever it is in that little piece. So the whole is in each part. So the same thing is true with your cells. Each cell is a whole for the... I don't know if I'm explaining this well because I see question marks. And it's really, see, this is my revelation. And that's part of the reason why I'm having trouble explaining this. Because here's what the revelation is. God is the wholeness, and each one of us is the part in the wholeness, but we are a hologram. So there's the totality in each one of us, okay? Each one of us is whole.
Holy.
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 But here's the thing. We have been having this discussion about diversity and color blindness, right? Some people go like, well, you have to recognize diversity. And others go, no, it's about color blindness. I don't recognize color. And so one is saying, I want to see the differences, and the other one saying, I don't want to see any differences. Well, here's the thing. It's not either or, it's both. Think about it. Because if we're whole, right, everything is in there. One cell right here in your finger is the same DNA as the one in your toe. So it's whole, okay? And therefore, all of us are whole. Each one of us has a different responsibility and activities that we're supposed to do in the world. We're not supposed to do the same thing. It's sort of like the cell in my finger is not supposed to do what the cell in my toe is supposed to do. Do you get it? Mm-hmm. Each one of us is whole. Each one of us is perfect. Each one of us is complete. Each one of us is a cell in God. And each one of us has something that we are here to do that cannot be done by anybody else. And so if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. evolve to know who we are, to know ourselves. Benedict, we've got to teach Benedict not who we want him to be. We have to get to Benedict and have him to understand, Benedict, you are a cell in God, and you're here for a purpose. We don't know what that is, but if you listen really hard, if you really, really want to know, God will tell you what your purpose is, and then you can do it. I didn't get told that when I was a child. I don't know about you, but they told me, this is how you behave, and if you behave like this, you'll be good, we'll pat you on the head. And if you're bad, we're going to spank you on the behind. Remember? We didn't get told what Benedict got told. But Benedict is living in a new age. Now here's the thing. Those of you who are around teenagers and young people, and you're going like, those kids today. Hey, they just think they're entitled to everything. They're just walking around here feeling entitled. And I mean, isn't that what we say about them? Haven't you heard that?
Yes.
Well, guess what? I was just a little baby child in Science of Mind. One of the first things that my minister said that I heard was, you are a child of God. And as a child of God, you are entitled to everything that you can accept. Think about that now. Next time you see one of these kids come along, say, hey, you must be, one of those new age kids coming through the new epic, coming forward, trying to remind us who we are and that we are entitled to the goodness that we are. But how do we access that goodness? We access it through love. We access it through love. We have to absolutely become more loving. And it's not easy. Do you remember a book years ago by Trina Paulus called Hope for the Flowers? Anybody read that? Remember that? It's a book about caterpillars turning into butterflies. It's a children's book. But here's what she says. How does one become a butterfly? She asked pensively, one of the little caterpillars, because the caterpillars are, getting ready to go into a cocoon and die, right? So one of them asked, how does one become a butterfly? She asked pensively. You must want to fly so much that you are willing to give up being a caterpillar. You mean to die? Asked Yellow. Yes and no, he answered. What looks like you will die, but what's really you will live. Think about that. We have to die to the fear. We have to die to the shame. We have to die to the guilt. We have to die to the unhappiness. We have to die to the anger. We have to have the courage to step into a place where we can love the man who was hurt and his family, who look like victims, and the man who did it, who looks like the perpetrator. We have to have the courage to learn to love so much that we can forgive, that we have compassion, and we have acceptance for each and every expression of God that is in the world, because each one is a part of the wholeness and is a cell in God and has some responsibility that we do not know. We don't know why that young man was injured. We don't know what his future will be. But haven't we all seen people who have been injured bravely like this and come back and lived very full lives, necessary lives, important lives, and having a message that without that injury, they could not have delivered that message. So their accident was their vehicle to what? Their greatness. Don't you know people like that? Haven't you seen people like that? They show them up on TV every once in a while. There's a guy that has gone blind that I saw, and another one who was in a wheelchair. I mean, and look at some of these soldiers that have come back from the wars, and they're going around telling stories that nobody would have been able to tell if they hadn't gone and done what they did. Our experiences in life and living are there to support the purpose we have in life, even when we don't know it. So all we can do is do what we do in the moment and be available to hear what is being told to us from within, and find ourselves, allowing ourselves to be guided by the divine, which is the wholeness of which we are a part. We can no longer allow ourselves to be dragged into that fear or the anger or whatever anxiety that everybody else is feeling. Now here is the other part of my revelation. If I am a wholeness in God, and think of this as yourself, saying, I am a wholeness in God. The totality of God is in me, but I am not the totality of God. And as I heal myself, as I become more loving myself, as I become more forgiving, more compassionate, more understanding, more wise, more courageous, then that which is in me is also in you. So as I heal myself, I heal you. As you heal yourself, you heal me, because we are one. That's the wholeness. When you take a hologram and you break it into pieces, and then you take part of the pieces and you break them again, guess what? You still have the wholeness. It keeps manifesting itself. Do you see? And so as I realize my wholeness, as I become more loving, there is more love in the world. We don't always see it, but it's there. My friend went to India, and they are doing seminars over there with helping people to awaken. And they're taking 1,000 people at a time, sometimes. And she was in a smaller group, so it was just over 100 in her group. It was really hot, she said. But guess where most of those people were from? China. She was in a room with 12 other people, and there was only one of them in there she could speak to that spoke English. She was from Canada. There is a worldwide movement going on for people desiring to be awakened. And look around, you are part of it. We are part of a movement that even if we don't see where it's happening, even if we're not, consciously participating in the totality of it, just our doing what it is we're doing is supporting the entire world, so that the world that Benedict grows up in is not the world that we grew up in the 1900s. We are creating the foundation, the loving, forgiving, compassionate foundation for a new world. And it's changing right before our eyes. And so when you see stuff going on, just look at the negative stuff, the patriarchal stuff, the power stuff, the violent stuff, and say, hey, there's a resistance right there. I'm not going to resist it. I'm going to look at that situation, and I'm going to be compassionate and loving, because I don't know what's going on there. But somehow, something is being born. Something is growing. Something is being birthed. And what do we have in birth but pain? Let us open our hearts and our minds and allow ourselves to be instruments of love, of peace, of joy, and of goodness in the world. And remember that we are the oneness, the wholeness, the cell in God. Music.